They've just beaten up that sort of emotional bank account, to use a Covey phrase.
Yeah.
But what happens is we never think from the mindset of what if we just every now and again hit them with a I don't need anything kind of email.
Yeah.
And I know I just heard a whole bunch of email marketers faint, but really truly, you could every now and again even ask them a question.
Right.
I got my open rate to shoot up. It was in the 20s. I got it up to 70-something% by asking questions in my emails and then actually responding when they hit reply.
Wow.
If you cultivate your email list, if you get them into the mindset that you're not just there to ask them to buy something, then what you're building is a sustainable relationship-minded community.
Right.
And then suddenly they do want to buy. Now, I don't understand when an email marketing person comes back to me and says, well, that's just not how business runs. You're defining business. You define the relationship.
Yeah.
Yes, you want more yield, but if you're getting no yield today, but you're saying I would opt not to try this other method, this is Einstein already talked about this one time. You know, doing the same thing all the time, expecting a different result means insanity. Sure. I think there's a lot of opportunity to tuck in some more personality and human face into this. I think of the human business as the most important thing coming into these coming years, and that's where trust comes back. Is look at about pages of companies. Are there faces on them or are there not? Look at these experiences. A little known secret: we do almost 100% of our buying from other people. Vending machines kind of ruined my skew there. On the web, usually a human has initiated this request for a transaction. Why not actually break the lie and actually act like a human every now and again? Because I think that sort of the physical takeaways of this, the real now what, after you kind of agree with me, is you have to write like a human. You have to write from your heart. You have to write from the perspective of, would I want my mom to get this letter? Even if it's B2B. That's the other one you'll get a pushback on. Somebody's picked up this series.
Expecting it needs to be professional.
Yes, this is business to consumer, and it's all well and good, but it won't work for me. 100% of people in business to business companies that I've met so far are human, or at least purport to be.
They don't always act like it.
That's right.
And they certainly don't always write like it. So I love this idea of just reaching out and communicating. In my own company recently, I saw everything was going out. It's under my name. And it's not from me directly. And I said to my team, I said, you know what? Have somebody else. It's from the Robbins companies, but when it's me, have it be me so people know it's coming from me. But on Twitter, I do that naturally. See, it's so interesting. In one context, I'm personally communicating to people, getting them back and communicating to them. But I'm not doing that in email. So stupid. So stupid. Thank you for that. That's really useful. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for a lot of people when they pick up a series like this is they get jaded. Well, I've heard this, or yeah, I understand trust, or of course you do this with your bill, or you add more value. And when I try to tell people, you and I are talking off cameras, there's like 3 levels to mastering something, and all I give a damn about is mastering something, because when you dabble, you get crappy results. You at best get a little result, and it's not consistent. Consistency is what makes somebody the best. So as I look at it and go, okay, there's cognitive understanding. You understand this, makes sense to me. Then there's emotional mastery where it not only makes sense to you, but you link consequences to it. It's like, if I do this, I get this pleasure. If I don't do it, it's cost to me. And then if you hear something over and over again with enough emotion, it gets in your body and you actually do it regularly, now it becomes part of your life. So people are hearing what you're saying, and a lot of people are looking for that lightning bolt. And what I'm finding is it's these little things that make that difference. Failure is a bunch of little things. It's not a cataclysmic event. It's failure to follow through. It's failure to say thank you. It's failure to add value that accumulate. Same thing with success. It doesn't just happen. It's all the little things you do well that accumulate. Give me 3 to 5 of the most important little things that make the difference, that separates the business out there today that's succeeding versus failing, if you would. Some of them can be repeats of what you said, just to lock it in if you want, but tell me what you think the most important ones are.
From my take, in my perspective, and the way that I like to see business done, and where I'm tracking some successes, both my own and some other people's, is number 1, standing out by being human. Make your own game is what we talked about in the book Trust Agents, but we said, be human. Be that one rare company that actually talks like people. I buy from people who act like this. I tend to like my transactions to feel like that. And I like the sense that I'm supported and that I have that comfort. We never want that sort of walk-away sale, that we know that they just took our money and left.
Right. So give me some examples of what that looks like or sounds like when it's not human, and give me an example of what it's like when it's human, so people know what we're talking about.
So being human is, to your point in the email marketing, of making sure that if it's from someone else, then it stays from someone else, and that you're adding in some human touches, and that when you do a letter from you, that maybe every now and again you just ask the question.
Yes.
You just ask what's going on. Other senses of that are using things like Twitter or Facebook, or even just commenting on blogs. I mean, imagine how impactful it would be for you to go out and to the kinds of clients that you're hoping to get, finding where they're blogging and just leaving the comment. Not
Yes.
any comment that says, and over here at my system, here's what I do.
Yeah.
Just being a commenter,
Yes.
because then you're in their memory set, and that gets you to their decision set, which then gets you closer to the buying set.
Interesting.
So that's one way to be human. Another way to look at this is think of that in the sense of being one of us. This is the thing we do in Trust Agents, and the way to do that is to, on these online presences you have, make sure it's just a picture of you. Try not to be somewhere in the glamour shot side and not in the half cut out person side, like your picture. It's an active, dynamic, in the moment kind of picture of you doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think leverage is something important. One of the things we do a lot in smaller businesses is we keep playing the same game and we're getting the same result and we're going, well, this is what we're doing, but we don't dare to take those chips and move them to the next game. So in this, the one way to look at doing that is start looking at how do you take what you've already succeeded at and move a nice trial piece off into something new. How do you start a new project? So for example, I went from being a blogger guy to a blogger guy who now runs some online communities, who's now building a business around how do I equip these communities for education and events and experiences.
And how did you make that shift?
I did it by realizing that
Because lots of people blog, billions of people, I think, at this stage. I might be
there's more
exaggerating
blogs
with the B,
than
but
humans, I think.
yeah, I think so.
So I made that shift because I felt that a blog is me on a podium, and I felt like a community was an opportunity for everyone else to sort of share the wealth. Because when we started Third Tribes, when Brian and Darren and Sonia and I started it, immediately in came these names that I'd never even heard of, who gave me ideas that I'm putting $10,000 in my pocket based on somebody else's post. I almost felt like I should give him back his $47 because I earned 10 out of him.
Right.
So in making that shift, what I did first was I earned people's respect and reputation for something I'd accomplished. I'm a top blogger. Ad Age says today anyway, because it shifts. I'm #1 today.
Oh, wow, congratulations. That's
Thank
wonderful.
you. But then I can move that and say, well, if Ad Age says I'm a pretty darn good marketing blogger, then you should come to Third Tribes and we'll talk about marketing there.
Sure.
From that, I'll leverage, well, I've successfully launched this community, and here's how I'm going to do education. You've seen how I write. You understand that I'm not going to mess with you because I have this history. We just leverage these little pieces and move them forward. I mean, you went from author to author speaking, creating experiences, and then all the different things that branched.
Right.
You leveraged it a little bit at a time. This series is leveraging your need for some information, or the need to give back to everyone with the information you found for yourself.
Exactly right.
So leverage helps. Two more quick tips. Always try to be that agent in the middle of everybody, what I call the agent zero. Robin Dunbar had this theory that you could only essentially have 150 close connections in your social network. And they don't mean that in the MySpace sense of the word.
Yeah.
Robin Dunbar's 150, we came up with the idea, well, what if you could be part of a lot of 150s? So I'm connected with the real estate crowd. I'm connected with the higher education crowd. I'm connected with the people in Minneapolis and the people in Milwaukee, et cetera. We tend to accidentally get stuck in our vertical as where we socialize. We tend to get stuck in our geographical location.
Right.
Well, if you're in Detroit and you're an auto worker and you lose your job, primarily everyone else also just lost their job as well.
Right, you're screwed.
In our mindset, then what we do is we have a network that spans a lot of verticals, and we have a better opportunity to build business.
Right.
If you say, gee, I really want to figure out something about wine, you know the person to reach out to ask questions.
Yes.
So I think that in that opportunity comes the last bit of the nugget, which is spend time looking at that database you have. Spend time asking yourself, where's the value in this? The businesses I'm seeing do really interesting things in this time right now aren't always just building their list. They're going back and massaging and giving love into that list to say, here's how I can help that person. Now, there are another 10 people I can bundle with this and then find some way to give them a product or a service that I can help all 10.
Right.
That's revenue, because then you're not fishing for it. You're actually bringing somebody that's already opted into one level of what you're doing, another way to help them succeed.
Right. Tell me how you look at affiliates. I mean, everybody talks about affiliates as a form of leverage. A lot of people don't see many results out of it. Some people get results for a period of time and leave out. Some people believe it's all about just giving the most money to somebody. Anybody intelligent knows that's not true, but how do you look at building an affiliate relationship, and how do you expand that and scale that?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So the industry in general, the blogging part of the industry in general, has really had a negative opinion from the early days. Affiliates were scammers, and affiliates were not disclosing where they were sending you and all this. And there's a lot of programs out there and a lot of weird cutthroat history out there between people who are trying to sort of, not do the right thing by their buyer and not do the right thing by the people in the middle of the system.
Right.
I pay no heed to that. The past is the past. What I found is that the minute I started getting involved in affiliate marketing, I could do two things at once. The person who had created something of value, for example, there's ChrisBrogan.com, there's a WordPress theme that I really like a lot. that was by a designer that I've known for years. And before I could afford his themes, I used to just kind of beg him to design for me for love. And so strangely, I didn't get that sale. But now he sells a product that you can buy, and I get some level of money out of it if you buy it through me.
Right.
That little square on my blog pays 3 times my mortgage every single month.
Wow.
So, I mean, this is not giant numbers. I do not live in a place with this view. But I will say this, that gave me a freedom from fear. That little rectangle is a freedom from fear. Because frankly, if my mortgage is covered, what do I have to worry about? I have to worry about, do my kids eat? I can get that one done.
Yeah.
You know, I can start a lemonade stand to feed my children if the house is covered, right?
Yeah.
So that's my view of it. So my view, when I told you I want to think about small businesses, who else can I get that idea for? So I think affiliates is this. It's the perfect marriage of a community who trusts that you're going to give them something good.
Yes.
And a product that you found or a service that you found that you think is great. Tony, I made the strangest video the other day. I was raving about my new little carry-on bag. I'll show you off camera later. Okay. A friend of mine told me, you got to try this bag. It's great. It's a brand you never would have tried. You don't like it, etc. I love the bag. I shot a video about loving the bag. You can see my little daughter trying to sneak up behind me in the video. And I've sold something like 70 of those bags, which blows my mind because my blog has nothing to do with luggage. And I've sold 70 of them because people believed. It's a $300 carry-on in a community of people who maybe would rather buy $100 luggage.
Yes. You already got me hooked since I live on the road too.
It's trust. It's trust, Tony.
But you're right, because you know that you're not going to put something out there that you don't personally find incredibly valuable. You know, it's interesting in my life, I've got about a dozen companies, a little more than that, and almost all of them were companies where I saw something was done. So rather than affiliates, I just went and bought the company, which gets to, you know, there's only so much scale you can do with that with the hours in your day. But I'm passionate about giving people what they really value, but I don't think about that in my blog. I don't think about things outside the context of personal improvement. And yet there's so many other things that affect quality of life that I wouldn't even think to communicate there. So that's really fascinating, and certainly not linking it as a business per se, where there's a benefit there. You're talking about something very close to my heart, which is so much uncertainty for so many people right now. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to, you know, they go and they see these ways to make $1 million or $500,000. Not that those monies can't be made, they certainly can. But to me, what I hope that the series would do is take an individual or a small business or a medium-sized business and just give them some aspect of certainty, relief, comfort, and freedom, you know? And that idea that, gosh, I could find a way, not even through a product or service I have, through something else someone else has created. They're the entrepreneur, they've created. All I've done is I'm sharing that information with other people and helping them, and that covers a base for them, whether it be their home or their car or whatever the case may be, is so valuable. So I'm really glad to hear you, because I have a lot of respect for you, Chris, and there's so much negativity associated to affiliates now. You're a fresh voice in that conversation. Do you find pushback from other people in your community when you talk about this way about affiliates?
No, you know what, really early on, that was kind of the experience. Very early on, people were sort of like, wow, I can't believe you're doing these affiliates. And they were complaining about, you know, Amazon links, you know, and I always disclose, not only does the FTC require it, but I always disclose that, you know, if you buy this, I'll get $1. You know, and I mean, that's really, affiliate money is usually really low on these lower end products. And now they've stopped. I mean, they've really stopped complaining, partly because they need the money too. You know what I mean? I mean, believe me, I can live without the $2 that if you buy this book I think is great, I'm sure I'll make it up somewhere. But I think that showing people, what I've been trying to do is do it by example. Because then suddenly the check gets to about $400 or $500, and then I get a check over here for $400 or $500, and that other one's giving me thousands. Well, suddenly I've gone from I can buy my kid a sandwich every now and again to we can all go out to Ruth's Chris and have a yummy steak.
Nice.
So I think that people's pushback on it just comes from the history. People's pushback comes from some people who really hit it hard and want to push products down your throat that you don't necessarily need. And I think the way to combat that is to always evaluate. I mean, look at Oprah Winfrey. In a lot of ways, the way the sponsorship model went on her show was, I'm only going to give things to my audience that I believe are going to enrich them. It won't be junk. It will never be this thing where I've sold my soul to give them a candy bar. We can all do that. I mean, just because that's one scale, I mean, you're a different scale. You would never push something that you thought wasn't going to, that was come back and bite you.
Of course.
We're all the same person that way.
Tell me this, Oprah's a great example. How do you stand out? You know, when she came along, it was a perfect example. There was a guy, I'm old enough to remember, I think, I was a little, very child, I'm sure at the time, named Donahue that dominated the space. Oprah came on and she stood out. She stood out because she was more human. You know,
right.
she had her problems, she had her foils. People related to her in a different way. Women specifically related to her. She talked about her weight. She talked about, you know, her struggles. She talked about being raped. She talked about some really heavy things no one had talked about, and she showed emotion and so forth. And she built this incredibly loyal group. The world today, there's advertising on your socks. It's on your banana. It's, you know, we're immune to it now. We kind of scan it out. How do you stand out in this marketplace? You talk about being human, but a lot of people are trying to be human too. I'm sure that's part of it. But what are some of the ways, I haven't heard you speak, but I watched one of your little videos, and you know, you came out immediately in a way that kind of broke the pattern. You know, what do you do? What do you tell people is the way to really stand out? Because maybe I own, you know, a real estate company. I'm an insurance salesman. I'm a car dealership. I have a retail place. I'm online. I'm marketing some form of information product or service. The world is doing that stuff, you know, and everybody's trying to get their attention, and they have very little attention. How do I break through?
That must have been me rapping in Atlanta. I do a lot to make my first few minutes of a speech connect with a human. And what I tend to do is I tend to make them laugh. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pop the bubble of you're this sort of internet marketer guy, and you're somehow vaunted, and we're not the same.
Yeah.
And so I'll make jokes, or I'll make, you know, little kid poopy jokes, because I think that I'm just trying to level set them on the idea that I actually breathe and, you know, bleed.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Yeah. And that you're not full of yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you can't laugh at yourself, then you've pretty much already lost the game.
Yeah.
We know very dignified people who don't do that.
Yeah.
You're right, and it does require more than being human. Some of the ways to stand out is in how brief you are, how great you are at service. Sometimes it's how colorful you are. I mean, we all know that person who has never lost their schoolyard language, no matter if they're meeting the Queen.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's lovely, sometimes you're a little off. Yes. The other side is that, I mean, this is sort of in the mindset of personal branding, I guess, and how it impacts a business. You have to be known for doing something. And so standing out is great, but are you standing out because you're actually accomplishing something?
Right.
So one of the things I did was I started an event with my friend Christopher Penn called PodCamp, where we started a movement to educate people on how to use blogs and all this sort of thing. And we open sourced it from the very first event, so that we've had over 100 or so of these events all over the world, where everyone comes and learns, and everyone's the star. There's no name marquee people. It's the opposite of a typical conference.
Right.
So in doing that, I could rest on that a little bit and say, here's one thing I've done. In writing a book, I said I did this. It's not enough just to be standoutish. It's who did you help? What could you do different? I do a charity every month. I know you do a lot of charity kind of stuff. I don't do it to check a box. I do it because I believe in those kinds of causes, and I want to show that there's dimensions to this. And especially as you start acquiring wealth, if you don't do that, you give off a different perspective as well.
Sure. What when you're looking at this process of you know, you help a lot of people and you activate it, what's the best way to activate your customers or to share what your customers are saying? Or does it just happen today on the web, period? You know what I mean?
It's a great question, because really the number one thing that these new social tools have allowed for is we get the perfect opportunity to complain all the time.
Yeah.
Julian Smith, who co-wrote Trust Agents with me, says all the time, "Oh, you're a blogger? What do you complain about?" And he's not wrong. I mean, if I'm stuck in an airline somewhere, if I'm just traffic is bad or something, I mean, there's always some moment to complain. Well, the opposite of this is we can also praise.
Yes.
And it's a lot harder to get a front page story on the New York Times about how when this box of soaps from Glyn Soaps came, that it came with an extra couple of little nice things in it.
Yeah.
That's never going to hit the front page. But I can send it out to what effectively becomes a couple 100,000 people. And I can keep pushing people to it all as much as I want, and show people that by example there's good stuff happening.
Right.
So I guess the basic premise is, I think that the tools allow us to hear from them. We don't need to get the testimonials that we used to have to in the old days.
Yeah.
Believe me, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to say, you know, Tony Robbins says Chris Brogan's a pretty darn swell guy. You know, but I mean, that's what blurbs on the back of books are.
Right.
Well, that's weird. The chairman of GM, you know.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we buy from the people we know. 70% of people buy from review sites. So we just ask Amazon, and we trust complete strangers.
Yeah.
It's a number I found while we were studying for the book. And then the other is we buy from people that we feel have a similar mindset to us. I mean, if you ask me a thing about golf clubs, I got nothing. Right. You know, my idea of golf involves the windmill and the clown. So I once shot like a 74, and that was the first hole.
Very good.
But I've got to tell you, you know, you ask me something about which computer gadget to mess with, or you ask me, you know, what's a way to get into somebody's head, what's a way to really, you know, put a human face back on a big car company, I got you all day. So we do that naturally, But I think there's tools now that let us sort of accumulate that. We can sort of build lists. We can start to, I mean, we talk about building internet marketing lists, but things like Twitter have lists in them that allow us to start seeing data in different ways.
Yes.
And all it's just going to take is, and frankly, I just turned off a good third of your money makers because they're saying, I got to get to mastery. Mastery sometimes is that unsexy part of looking in your data and seeing really where there's a bubble and what can you do with that.
Right.
And so frankly, every now and again, we have to crack open an Excel spreadsheet and look at where the value is.
Tell me, if people are wanting help in this area, they're looking and saying, I don't know how to evaluate my data. Listen, I can add value. I know my passionate product or service. I know what I'm about. I've got something I could share. And I know other people's products and services that I'd highly like to recommend. But the side of this business that says, measure the data, who's responding, at what percentage, and so forth. For small businesses, do you have those types of services, or do you point people to someone who can say, here's a great way for us to kind of coach you and consistently help you on that specific aspect of the business?
That's a good question. So for small businesses, there's sort of web analytics companies that have risen up. In Boston, where I'm from, there's a company called HubSpot that has a real great suite of tools that allows you to sort of mechanize all that and get a real sense of where things came in from and who's talking about what. There's listening tools like Radian 6 that'll show you where the conversations are and what's going on. My company, New Marketing Labs, my bigger company, is mostly working with real big companies on how to take their marketing a little more social, how to add some strategy that will be a little more human-based. The other stuff I'm doing is a little more educational, so what we'll start doing is we'll start talking about that data there. We do talk about it a little at Third Tribes Marketing. We ask the question, what do we do with the list once we have it? And you'd asked that question earlier. That's something that we'd handle there. So yeah, in different ways I approach that. I think that it does matter differently for different companies. I mean, think if you're a small mom and pop and you have maybe 6 employees, and even that's good, you're not really going to crack open a spreadsheet and look. You're just going to keep looking at the register and wondering where it rang. But it was amazing when you start talking about people about, well, do you want to sell some more of your product online? Oh, then we light up. So then there's just a question of how do you translate the social tools to do that? There's a lot of good people doing that kind of work out there, and you can start looking for small business online marketing or small business internet marketing. Duct tape marketing, John Jantz is a friend of mine, good fella. I would say that those are the kinds of people who are doing that work in a really big way and helping people figure out how to do it that size.
Now, you mentioned, for example, helping a car company, a big car company, figure out how to put a human face on themselves. Give us an example of some of your ideas in that area, because I think sometimes people, you can intellectually describe the process, but we're story makers. We all learn through stories. Could you give us some examples of maybe some companies you've worked with and how you've helped them put a face on? Because people might be able to extrapolate from that some ideas for themselves.
All right, so Sony Electronics USA asked us, can we do a bunch of product reviews with digital cameras and Blu-ray machines and those sorts of tools, and can we take and do something with them that maybe has something to do with dads? Because one of the sites I ran and run sometimes is called dadomatic.com, which is a bunch of dads talking about their experience. Because I think there's a billion mommy bloggers. There's got to be as equally amount of dads. It turns out it takes 2. So I'm figuring we're neglecting 50% of the marketplace, so I went after it. We built a program with them that we don't just review the cameras. We came up with projects for every single one of their products that we'd say, okay, so for the still camera, let's have kids take 100 photos of faces. You've seen what it's like when kids use cameras. It's always hilarious. You see every chin you ever had. You see every foible. They catch you in the ugliest face, and it's funny. So we get 100 of those photos per kid per camera, and now we've got something. We did with the video cameras, we said, why don't you interview grandpa or grandma or whoever's alive and make this multi-generational thing where, again, the kid's doing the interviewing with a little help from the dad. So what we did by this is it was a product review, but it was a family story review.
And it created emotion.
And everybody with that emotion brought all their relatives to see it. Who's going to come rushing to see a video camera review? Come on, let's see Grace look at the video camera. But instead Grace is interviewing all her relatives. And so it was just a beautiful experience. It got a lot of write-up for that, and people started seeing that. That's the kind of project I want, because then guess what? You then do buy the camera. You say, well, gee, that kid was using it. It worked just fine. My 7-year-old daughter uses another one of their cameras called the Bloggy. It's like a flip camera or whatever. You flip it open, you push the button, and it runs. And we went out, did a nature walk with it. She had so much fun. It's those kinds of experiences that translate into, oh, well, I can use this too. I can see how it's useful. And then, to me, that's putting the human face on it. Then we buy from our belly, which usually overrides our head anyway.
Right. That's beautiful. Car company, give me an example there.
Car company. So what I want to do is, and I haven't even done it yet. So let's see if I can beat the pitch to the DVD's release. I want to take the idea of the first listening car company. I want to have the first one where, so GM has OnStar. And OnStar, you can on the side of the road say, hey, I just broke down, or, actually I wanted to go to a movie tonight, what's nearby? It's a great thing. I went into their headquarters and saw it. They're not a client. And in so doing, I thought, well, what about the first listening one? What if if I'm in the Buick LaCrosse, and what if every time I'm in it, I could talk about whatever, and they would give me the information via another service like a Twitter or something like that. Or I'm stuck getting an oil change, and they call and they say, well, we just sent you enough money to buy a couple of free soda pops for the kids while you're doing it. How could the first listening car company, Alan Mullally's doing a lot to make his car like a little driving home entertainment center. The Ford vehicles coming out are amazing with what they're doing on the dash now.
Right, and Ford's the only dealership, the only company that's profitable, or
that's right.
I guess this year profitable at least.
He's got some good ideas.
Yeah.
I wanted the other way around. I wanted to see what if we could listen instead of what if we could just consume.
Right.
And so I'm working on that. I'm also working on how do I get more people to test drives. Because it turns out that all these online gee-whiz marketers are saying, let's start a blog and a Facebook page, and strangely, that doesn't really bring you to the dealership. So I'm working on a metric that's not social media, that's not blogging, but body at dealership. Right. And so I'm going to make all my social marketing point towards how do I get you to the dealership. Because then, if I have 1,000 test drives, that translates into 180 buys or whatever it is.
Right.
It's a number they know.
Right.
That's the other thing we have to look at when we're using all these crazy internet tools, especially if we're not a crazy internet company.
Yes.
Don't use the weird social media metrics. Use the cash register. Use the things Use the, did I or didn't I sell something? Because that's the only metric that's going to matter to you.
True. For the people here just listening, I want to come back to listening once again, because as simplistic as that sounds, it's not done.
Right.
It's like, everybody says, oh, this is all common sense. And I go, yeah, common sense is not too common, at least in its use. The listening side of these things,